I will be presenting to you today a review of effective reading strategies for primary grade students. The presentation in PowerPoint is by myself, Michelle Wilson. The research behind this presentation was done by myself and two other partners from my class, Sydney Waldner and Rebecca Hamilton. So I want to kind of start with what was the purpose behind this literature review. I've been teaching for 8 years, and this year was the first year that I was presented with the task of having to teach reading. I've been a math and science teacher for 7 years. So we lost a teacher, and I had to start teaching reading to a class of 29. So when the opportunity came up for us to become an expert in an area, I knew that I needed to start researching and finding information about reading. And I knew if I was a classroom teacher with this interest, I knew there would be other teachers that would also have an interest in, what goes into making this effective reading program. Because if your students are not reading on their grade level or comprehending, then it creates all types of issues with your other academic areas. So two of the big questions that came into play here are what are the key components to create an effective reading program? And what are the specific best practices for reading teachers on a primary grade level? Those were the two questions that kind of guided this entire presentation. Reading research has shown that an effective reading program needs five key components: phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, and which are all skills used simultaneously when people read. So, with the primary reading program, the learner is going to need to be exposed to literacy early in their education career, explicitly taught comprehension skills. They're going to need strong vocabulary development, provide them time for fluency practice, as well as the teacher being flexible with reading content connected text. So if we're studying animals, let's study animals of Africa as well as animals of Brazil, connecting the text that the students are exposed to, as well as providing them text that they're interested in. You also provide a program that is developmentally appropriate. You're meeting the needs of those students, which creates a data driven environment. So the teacher knows the level of the students and she's providing instruction on those levels. So throughout this presentation, we'll be hitting these five components. What do they mean? And we'll also be understanding specific strategies that teachers can implement to help provide these skills that readers use to be effective readers, to be that strong reader. Here with this slide, before I get into the key components to an effective reading program, I found some research on just some general things that the effective teacher should keep in mind. Reviewing and checking previous work. So when a student completes a task, the teacher is checking their work and providing them feedback. The teacher is always presenting new material, keeping the students actively engaged and their interest going, um, providing them feedback and corrections. If they do an assignment, don't just put it to the side. You're grading that assignment, giving them feedback so they know how they can improve the next time. Overall, teachers are showing skills and they're providing opportunities for practice with those skills and strategies in various texts and on their level, and that also attends to their interests. That's a big thing. You want the students to be motivated about what they're learning. Another thing that was brought up with Rupley's research was that we teach students all these skills, but the teacher has to be aware that you've got to make sure they're making the connection between the skills that they're learning and how those skills relate to real world situations, that critical thinking piece. So we don't want them to be isolated. We don't want to teach them everything in isolation. You want to bring it back to them understanding, well, I'm learning how to decode this word so that I can actually read a book. or maybe I can read a street sign. And you want to be very direct with these strategies, as well as sometimes you may be indirect where things may come up as you're teaching one skill. Okay, so now we're going to get into the component of phonics. And I actually have a personal relationship with phonics. When I found out that I was going to be teaching reading language arts, I kind of had like a freak out moment because I have no phonics skills. And that's the thing about education, it's always like a push in a program. So I'm assuming that when I started to learn how to read, we were, and I say we, but I wasn't a teacher then. The education world was pushing whole language approach. Teach them the words, teach them the words. Because as an adult, I have none of the phonics skills that students need. Phonics is an important component that bridges the gap of language and the alphabetic symbols to aid in reading and spelling. It creates a way for learners to decode certain words. It, it's the relationship between the print and what I'm actually saying. So when students are reading and they encounter these words that they don't know, they can lean on phonics to help them to read the word. Because it could be a word that they actually know, they just never seen it in print. So if they can sound out the sounds of it, the word can be read. So now let's look at some strategies that help teach these phonics skills that my teacher somehow left out when I was in reading. Okay, so now the specific phonics strategies. In this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on 3 strategies. There are several other strategies out there, but just to kind of get a resource that a teacher can kind of go to get them started, and that's exactly what we're doing here, providing something that's, teachers can pull from, and they just got 3 strategies to start with. And that's elongating sound strategy, kinesthetic information strategy, and the analogy phonics strategy. All research-based strategies. And let's go ahead and look at what makes up each one of these. Okay, here is the elongating sound strategy to teach phonics. First, you start out by sounding out each letter in the word from left to right and blending the sounds together in order to read the word. So here we're looking at frown. So F would create its own sound. The R creates its own sound. The O, W creates a sound together. And then the N creates a sound. And then they're all blended together to create frown. So you have frown, frown, frown. With the kinesthetic information strategy, you already know with kinesthetic, you're going to be dealing with movement, and we're working with phonics. So the teacher's explicitly teaching students how they shape their mouth and creating certain sounds for particular letters. And the key thing here is you're teaching them the sound, how they should hold their mouth, but you also have that print element there because phonics is all about the relationship of sound to print. The next strategy that was pulled for teaching phonics is the analogy phonics strategy. Here, the students learn new words by using a relationship to a known word. So if you take a look at the examples that I've provided, if a child knows bat, then I'm just changing that beginning sound to create cat, rat, bat, hat, pat, flat, mat, fat, sat. Whereas if you know can with that an in it, then there's tan, van, ban, all those other words come into play. So it's taking the ideal of learning one word and you can create a relationship and learn several words because you know the one word. Okay, now we've came to phonemic awareness and helpful strategies. Now, phonemic awareness is a critical first step to reading letters. A lot of people confuse phonics and phonemic awareness, But the difference is phonics makes the relationship of the sound and print. Phonemic awareness is all about the sound. It's all about the sound, getting the students just to understand the sounds and listening. So you do a lot of listening games and rhyming games here with the phonemic awareness. One example of a listening game that I read about that a teacher used was when the kindergartners would come back from lunch because phonemic awareness is a good primary, that initial first step activity or component. When the students would come back from lunch, you would have them lay out on the carpet and just listen for what sounds they could hear. So they would identify the air condition, or they may hear footsteps coming down the hall, or somebody breathing. Another good listening game would be one student would go into the middle. We would create a class circle, or you create a class circle, and that student lays in the middle, and one person is the cow, and they go into some part of the classroom and they say, moo, moo, I'm the cow. And the student in the middle has to point to the direction of where they hear that student. Um, Rhyming games, you have games as well as you also have some, exposure to print. I mean, some not print, but you have them reading text. So you read a lot of Dr. Seuss books, uses a lot of rhyming words. You do a lot of the poems and songs that focus in on certain letters, but they have a lot of rhyming words in them. And then you can do in the box, which is an activity where you put a lot of pictures, no words, because remember, phonemic awareness is all about the sound. But you put a lot of pictures inside of a box, and the pictures have to rhyme. So you may do a cat, and they may have a picture of a hat. So you put in the picture, you have every student pull them a word out of the box, and they try to match it with another student tries to go inside the box and match it. So student A pulls out cat, then student B will go through the box and try to find hat. Then one other student randomly pulls, and the other student tries to find the word that rhymes. So those are just a couple things with phonemic awareness, not to be confused with phonics, because phonemic awareness is all about the sound, and phonics is about the sound with the actual print. The next component we're going to be looking at is fluency. So fluency refers to reading with ease and smoothness. It's a direct correlation between comprehension and fluency. It's the reader going through and not having any problems just reading the information. They're not stumbling over words. They're not stuttering a lot. And that's why you teach them the decoding skills so that if they do come to a word they don't know, they're able to easily sound it out with their phonics or decoding skills. There are three things that describe the ability to read orally that affect fluency, and that's automaticity, accuracy, and prosody. Accuracy refers to the reader's ability to read text without errors and pronunciation. Automaticity is defined as the reader's ability to read text effortlessly and without errors. Prosody is better known as reading with expression, proper phrasing, and intonation. So if there's an exclamation mark, reading that exclamation mark with excitement, or if it should be sad moment, they're able to read it sad, because all of these components affect comprehension, which we'll be discussing in just a few. Okay. Okay, so research has already said that fluency has to be one of the components in the effective reading program. But there are also strategies that you have to implement to have that strong fluency component in the classroom. First, they suggested modeling fluency. This component consists of listening to a fluent reader read a text. Even though the student is not reading, it provides them with a model of what fluent reading looks like. Next, they suggested assisted reading. This involves a reader reading a text while simultaneously listening to a fluent model of the text. So this can be done through partner reads. You can do choral reads. You can do, they have a little strategy called knee to knee, where the students turn to each other and read together. Finally, they recommended repeating reading. This is simply reading the same text repeatedly until the desired level of achievement is reached. So now we're going to look at some reader's theater. And reader's theater is a specific strategy of doing repeated readings to getting that student to being a fluent reader. Mm. Reader's theater is a research-based method that embeds repeated readings into it to get students to be fluent readers. So teachers should give reader's theater the utmost consideration because it incorporates numerous methods of fluency that have been proven beneficial, such as modeling. You do echo reading, buddy reading, choral reading, and most importantly, it's all about the repeated readings. You don't need any acting, there's no props, there's no costumes or scenery. It's just the student having these multiple exposures to reading the same text. They're getting familiar with words that they have not worked with, or they're getting the chance to be able to read something that they're had practice with. So your struggling readers and your non-struggling readers are all motivated about this. Students will be more likely to practice the text over and over if they get to perform the reading in front of an audience, which is what reader's theater is all about. Here's an example from a classroom teacher who made reader's theater an integral part of her reading instruction. And you can read through it, but it takes you through Monday through Friday, the steps that he or she went through in implementing this in the classroom. So Monday is basically just an exposure to the text. They kind of start getting familiar with what they're reading, and whatever the comprehension strategy is for the week is also introduced. The second day is when the students kind of go in, they pick who do they want to be in this play. What role do I want to take on? And you'll notice later I'll present some research that found that as the students kept practicing their reader's theater, the struggling readers wanted to take on harder roles than just the they wanted to take on the larger roles or have more text to read than just, a few words. Wednesday, the students kind of start going through those fluency elements. They're understanding what the text is all about. They're learning how to read it. That prosody goes into play. Should I be reading this sad? Am I happy here? Is this exciting? And then Thursday is a practice run through, where Friday is the performance day. So the teacher that implemented this reader's theater into her reading instruction for the repeated readings, which goes with the fluency component, she had a lot of significant qualitative and quantitative results. Now, on the qualitative side, the students, especially the struggling readers, cannot wait until Fluency Friday. So you saw a lot of motivation increase. The colleagues and administration were commenting what it was a great way to get students interested in reading, especially the struggling readers. There was also information that was talking about how, what I was telling you earlier about how those struggling readers started off requesting small parts, but as the year went on, requested the bigger parts because they were becoming more comfortable in their reading ability because of all these repeated readings, because of all this practice. They were able to gain the skills they needed to be successful, which motivation is always the key. If we can get the students motivated about what they're doing, nothing can stand in their way. Now let's take a look at some of the quantitative data that the Reader's Theater created in the classroom. Now let's take a look at some of the quantitative results from using Reader's Theater. The students went from reading 55 words per minute to reading 93 words per minute. From the pre-test to the post-test, they went from 6.7 errors in accuracy to only 1.2 errors in accuracy. Um, you also had a significant gain in comprehension, which is a major important component out of the five, because comprehension is understanding, which we'll get to in the next slides. Comprehension is making sense or understanding what you're reading. So the comprehension of the class went from 49% to a class average of 89%. So obviously, repeated readings through Reader's Theater give struggling readers and your strong readers authentic reasons to read and reread a text. It boosts their confidence, it helps increase comprehension. So it's a major component that can be a part of a reading, effective reading program. Here on this slide, I just included two others Monday through Friday steps of implementing some fluency strategies. The fluency oriented instruction just takes one text and provides multiple reads of the text. First day is kind of the teacher and the students all together. Then it starts to break off into doing the echo reading and choral reading. Um, each day is just a different level till finally it's the Friday where you do some type of extension activity. Now, the wide reading, fluency reading instruction is the same, almost the same instruction level, except instead of using one text, the teacher uses three. So this could be where in a classroom you kind of bring in your flexibility of the teacher and provide differentiated instruction where you may have your lower level students working with one text and your students that are higher in their reading, they may be working with three different texts. Another essential component to the effective reading program is vocabulary instruction, which should be taught directly and indirectly. You want to make sure you're exposing students to lots of vocabulary, and you're going to encounter vocabulary in the reading, in social studies, in science, in math. There's vocabulary in all the content areas, but you got to make sure that you're teaching the students what these words mean, as well as making relationships as words sometimes overlap. I have a great example of we were doing community and science. Well, in the science aspects of community, we were learning that the community is all of the living things in an ecosystem. And then community came back around when we were studying social studies, where we were learning that the community were a group of people that had a similar interest. So in the ecosystem, it was still that same group, but it was the living group. Well, in social studies, it was the group that shared that similar culture or had a common interest. Um, a couple strategies that go into teaching vocabulary are discussions where students are using accountable talk. The teacher's doing read alouds. Students are taking part in those read alouds and hearing this vocabulary. And also written expression of the language experiences. Students needs to be writing and using the vocabulary that they have learned. You want to teach them how to use context clues when they're reading certain words. Because when you read a text, they're going to sometimes explain what a word means within that passage, as well as provide them with graphic organizers that, relate different words or walk them through concepts or definition maps, as they would refer to them. Now we're going to look at book readings. Book readings are another strategy for teaching vocabulary. With book readings, this is when a teacher reads a text to the whole class. The students participate in discussions about the text before, during, and after. There's that accountable talk coming into place. The teacher is also responsible for providing a rich language experience during the book reading, focusing on different vocabulary words. So they are the teachers being intentional about certain vocabulary, and then you never know when you're having those discussions what vocabulary may come up for the students. I could think of an instance in my class where the students had a question about, God, I can't remember the exact question, but it brought me to the student because the word was a grandfather clock. And I asked her, do you know what a grandfather clock is? And she was like, no. So we got on the internet, we Googled, we looked up a grandfather clock. And although it wasn't extreme vocabulary, she had no prior knowledge of or idea what a grandfather clock was. She also was thrown off by a timer because now we live in a digital world where a lot of the timers are on the computer or on your phone, where they were doing it was an hourglass, not a timer, it was an hourglass. And she was just a little thrown off by that. So that was something else that we Googled. So it wasn't necessarily hard academic vocabulary, but she had no background knowledge and it needed to be directly showed and taught to her for her to understand. And this can be done through book readings. Now we've made it to the major piece of the reading program, which is comprehension. This is where the reader is learning to make meaning of the text. Okay. The reader will activate relevant background knowledge. Just like I was saying before, students need certain prior knowledge or information just to be able to read or relate to a text. Strong readers create visual and other sensory images from reading the text. They're able to draw inferences from the text to create conclusions based off evidence. They're able to take the information in that text and come to their own conclusions about it. They're able to process beyond just what's in the passage. The students are also able to take this information and generate questions about the text. They also are able to determine the most important details and themes of the text, and they're able to synthesize what they're reading. And that's a hard level. Synthesizing is all about taking this new information and putting it with knowledge that the student already has. So they're either creating an original idea, they may be altering a perspective, or it may be some type of new line of thinking or insight that they've come to. But it's those aha moments that happen when we read, it's those connections that are made. So now let's look at some strategies that go with comprehension, because those are the strategies that the readers need to do, but how do you specifically teach these things? Okay, so with those 6 strategies that successful readers do to make meaning of text, these are 2 strategies that go along with specifically teaching those things. So question answer relationship strategy is where the students are going to be answering comprehension questions by teaching them how to find information they need to answer questions. So they're finding that relevant or irrelevant information. So this kind of goes with those inferences. So if I'm creating an inference, am I using the relevant information or did I try to create an inference off of irrelevant information? Um, and this goes with those metacognition strategies, getting the readers to understand they're thinking about their thinking. They're taking an active step in understanding the thinking process and applying what they're doing. They're intentional while they're reading. Now, the other one is directed reading and thinking activity. Here, students are doing predictions and set a purpose prior to reading the text. During the reading, the teacher stops students to have them revisit their purpose and predictions and make any modifications if needed. Then, after the reading, students examine the text for evidence to support their predictions. So, as they're going through there it is again, that metacognition. They're thinking about their thinking. I made this prediction. Was this prediction right? So, based off the evidence, was this relevant or was it irrelevant? Writing instruction is another effective reading program component. Now, the National Panel of Reading didn't make it a part of those 5 components that we've been talking about this entire presentation, which were phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. But writing is just as important as those other elements. Writing is a way of showing that information was comprehended. It's the way that the reader can take what they know and kind of show it. Um, Classroom writing time provides students the structure and direction needed to understand, develop, or use specific writing strategies to become better readers. So the writing and reading, it works hand in hand. So although it's not a part of those 5 components, it's still embedded within all of them. It's still embedded with all of them because you have to have that writing element. The only one that I would say may not be composed of writing would be that phonemic awareness because there's no print available there. It's all about the sounds. Okay, just again, like all the other components with writing, you're going to be still very intentional about teaching these students these skills. So, guided interactive writing activities is when the teacher creates large print lists, charts, letters, poems, recipes, stories, or maybe write down phrases or quotes that students in the class may have said. And this can be done by document camera. They may have out their chart paper and post them up around the room, but you want to be very intentional about teaching the students writing. Another non threatening way to get writing in the environment is journaling. It's an opportunity for the students to explore their reactions and to respond to text. And you never want to grade a journal. It's just a way for them to get them to write and get them to like to write. There were not a lot of quotes in this presentation, but here's the conclusion. I decided to use one of the quotes that we had in the literature review, and I'm actually going to read it because it's very important. It kind of summarizes everything that we've kind of hit on today. It says the National Reading Panel's analysis made it clear that the best approach to reading instruction is one that incorporated explicit instruction in phonemic awareness, systematic phonics instruction, methods to improve fluency, and ways to enhance comprehension. All of those are those key elements to producing that great effective reading program. The only thing that quote left out was not mentioning and not forgetting about the vocabulary and the writing, which are still two important components. You want the students writing about what they're learning. And of course, you can't write unless you have that vocabulary that is necessary to write. Um, I hope this presentation has been beneficial to you. And when I say you, I'm speaking to teachers who are in the reading program. I know me doing this review has me rethinking a lot of things that I've been implementing in my classroom because you need to really be hitting on all these components on that primary level. These 5 components are essential for kindergarten through 6th grade. Kindergarten through 6th grade. Although phonemic awareness is more so on that very younger kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, 1st grade level, you still you still want your students actively engaged in instruction. I thank you for listening and following these slides, you will find all the references that we use for this literature review. Thank you.